if you feel a ping point over this conversation, or if you're like really ticked right now, think about why.
Yeah.
Like we said, what's important here is that conversations are happening, that you are asking questions, that you are evaluating. Why do I do what I do? Why do I believe what I believe? And do I honestly still believe those things? Or am I just caught in the wave of culture? Great to have Alec and Maddie with us again as we continue to talk about some
Thank you, Juli.
marriage myths. Yes. Such a good voice. What are the marriage myths that we're talking about today?
Yeah, and we don't have
normally we start off with exactly.
I think we're going to do the exact same thing. Do you want? I'll let you do it.
Well,
You do
okay,
it.
sure.
That's a great lesson.
Yeah, sure.
It's a great thing to do. You do
Oh
it.
man. All right. So we don't have a burning question this time because this literally is the burning question, what we're talking about in this episode.
This whole episode is fire.
Yeah. So guys, once again, we are so thankful for all of the just comments that everyone sends in of different topics that they want us to go over. But one of the questions, now this is a big question, of course, is that we constantly get is all about sex. And so there's so many different variables with that. But today we knew that we wanted to talk, of course, and start to handle this topic of sex.
Yeah, we've talked about sex somewhat up to this point, but today we want to tackle two specific myths. We're going to call it marriage myths. Marriage myths. That's hard to say. Like it comes out with a little bit of a lisp. Marriage myths. Yeah, I can't do it. That it will be good for us to tackle down today. And we've had a lot of comments and questions along these lines. So here we go. Ready? No, you're about to say something.
I was going to say, I feel like in this realm of sex within marriage, sex before marriage, there are a lot of people who claim to be experts. And,
Is that what you're claiming, Juli?
I am not.
Oh, okay.
I certainly
You're not a sexpert?
am not. No, I am not. And, we do get a lot from the Bible around sex, but the nuances aren't covered specifically. And then, like you were saying earlier, Maddie, that there is this level of expertise and people cling to it. Like you're saying, Alec, a lot of the questions and comments are around this subject. So it's easy for people to elevate their opinions to truths in order to gain the access into this really intimate part of people's lives. And so we don't take this lightly. Certainly, we want to offer first and foremost what the Bible does say, because that is going to be an authority that goes beyond our reasoning, understanding. Like God created us. He created us for sex, not only for sex, but it is a gift.
He created us to be sexual beings.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, not only sexual. I think that has just been taken to this level.
Yeah.
Like we're
Right,
sexual
Juli.
beings. And so the exploration of that is such a natural part. And even to the point where it's like it glorifies God for us to explore that. It's like that's not what defines us, but it is certainly a gift within the correct context.
That's good. I'm actually going to restate what I said because of what you just shared. He didn't create us to be sexual beings. He created us as sexual beings.
Yeah.
Because the goal of our flourishing and development is not to explore every form of sex and sexuality, whatever that territory may offer to us. And so today, during the episode, we're going to share some things that are truths, biblical truths, universal truths, and we're going to share some opinions. And I think it's important that we don't call opinions truth, categorical truth, and we don't call truth just an opinion. So the first myth today is the myth that sleeping around, sleeping around before marriage is practice for when you're married, that it's better for couples to sleep together, to live together before they're married, that actually leads to better marriages
And lower divorce rates.
rates. Yeah.
I mean, you talk about opinions. I mean, this is definitely one that people have strong opinions on both sides for sure. Yeah.
Even like people we know as well who feel like it's better to test drive the car before you drive the car. And they will put up such a fight for that. And so, it's definitely
very, very personal to them, of course. So, Wow. All right.
So what are some thoughts on this?
So you're asking the newlyweds.
I'm asking the newlyweds because
what are our thoughts?
I mean, we're 15 years removed from the temptation of trying the car, driving the car before you buy it.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all are, this is a more recent season for y'all.
Yeah.
Well, what were the convictions that kept you, because you both had saved yourselves for marriage?
Yes. Yeah. So both
incredible.
Maddie and I saved each other for marriage.
And
saved
if
each
you
other?
could say
Well, we didn't say, excuse me, word choice there. I didn't use them correctly.
Yeah,
you know.
I've got you.
Yeah, no. We both did not have sex before marriage.
if you could condense it down to like a sentence, why?
Why?
Yeah, why?
I'll let you go first because I need to. No, I'm joking.
And I'm thinking of this even for people who have teenagers, and the question of like, why?
Yeah, why?
Well, there definitely is.
Yeah.
Well, I had a big conviction whenever I was younger, and actually, this is something that I believe we even talked about within Moms and Men. So within Moms and Men, I had that was a series that Lisa did, and then she had Addison, Austin, Arden, and myself all come on, and we answered some questions just as young men, just trying to explain certain things in the way that like we saw different things. And there was a similar question that you asked, Juli, that I answered this way, and I definitely answer it again because it still is the same for me. And so I basically had this idea of a balloon. And it was kind of like a balloon that was blown up with air, or it was or it was full of water. But basically, there was a full balloon, right? And basically, like myself and like my sex life, essentially, whenever I get married, I'm kind of giving my wife a balloon, but this balloon is not tied off. And actually, the only way that air escapes from this balloon is if you actually let go of the actual mouth of the balloon. So I had this vision that, hey, if I was to, actually sleep around with somebody else, I'd be actually letting air out of my balloon, that every time that I would actually go certain distances with actually different women or certain distances, or even just having sex, that like literally I'd be letting out so much air out of this balloon. And literally, hey, how much air am I going to have at the end that I'm going to be able to give my wife? And so that kind of like gave me this like respect for sex. And I know that sounds so weird to say, like a balloon, like really like that's how, but really, I don't know. It was like this big conviction for me. And I know that I have had friends who, of course, have, essentially let all the air of their balloon, but then God, of course, has redeemed them as well. And I totally believe that God could put air back into that balloon. But really, I had this strong feeling of, I want to be able to give myself, or I want to be able to give a full balloon to my wife. Mm-hmm. Again, I know that sounds weird, but I had just this strong respect for sex.
Yeah.
And so it really wasn't going to change my mind whatever anyone could actually say to me at school or things like that, because I was like, I'm giving all of this. I'm giving this one thing, the one thing that I know I do have control over, to my wife. And so that's the way I saw it.
Along that vein, like I know I felt like I was the protector and the guardian of my purity. And so I, like being brought up in the church, a PK, honestly, that's a lot of what like all my childhood, and that's a lot of what I knew. And so I knew what God thought about sex and sex before marriage. And I had such a deep love and trust that the way he designed it was best, even if I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And that my role in that was to protect and to guard, with the belief that when, you know how the scriptures say, awaken love at the right time, so that when it was the right time for that love to be awakened, it would be beautiful and right and sacred, all the things that it's meant to be. And so I wanted the fullness of sex. I didn't want it to be cheapened in any way. I wanted it for what God intended it or designed it to be. But
so basically Maddie's answer is like, she looked at things biblically. I looked at things kind of like a child and like a balloon.
No, and I also, like, I have a journalistic background, so I did a bit of deep diving. I wanted to know what exactly happened to our body chemistry when we gave ourselves to somebody else, especially in the confines of something that wasn't committed.
Yeah.
And what I discovered is that you actually create this hormonal connection with that other person.
Yeah.
It actually creates a soul tie. And so that's why a lot of teenagers or young women, or actually really anyone who's had a sexual relationship with someone, like especially women, they can tend to get a little bit clingy, or at least that's what people would be like, oh, she's so this or so that. But that's actually not necessarily her as much as it is her hormones. They've been awakened and she's meant and she's designed to feel that way. It's just it was awakened in the wrong context. And so
well, and that does make sense, because within marriage there is this level of intimacy and joining that happens when you're having sex regularly. I mean, the amount of friends, 15 years in, we have friends who are navigating what could be marriage-ending conflicts. And the first thing I'll always ask them, how frequently are you having sex? And it's not like that will fix everything, but it is a massive indicator that, of course, you feel disconnected. Like monthly is not okay. It makes sense that there would be this disconnection. And that is very clearly covered in the Bible, where he says, your body doesn't belong to you. It belongs to your husband. His body belongs to me. If we abstain from sex, it's because we have discussed it. It's for a set amount of time and purpose. I don't know what that would be, but... And then we come back together.
It's a sacrifice. It's a clear sacrifice.
There's clarity around it. No one is weaponizing it. No one is using it as a manipulation tool within the relationship, because it is this joining, this weaving together where, you know, you can be, I don't know, you can just be in a rough patch. You can be navigating things and you're like, oh, it's been a week. Like, let's start there. And there's clarity. It's not that I think people can get really weird and manipulative where it's like they cover it up with that or they use it. I don't even know. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's this connector. It is this soul to soul, spirit to spirit even.
So actually, on that, if you don't mind, can I interject for a moment? That weaving, so even speaking just biblically, I mean, there's so many different things that I know talk about within the Bible about how that connecting, you know, a man will leave his father and mother and leave and cleave, right? And then there's also two becoming one, right? So if you were to say, if I was to look at this actual myth and like sleeping around, would I go back and do it differently now that I'm married?
Yeah, on the other side of marriage.
Yeah, I'll answer that. And the answer is like, absolutely not. So
like, do you feel like you missed out on something? Do you feel like your marriage is not what it could have been if you would have done something like that?
For me, I always had an idea of what sex would be. You know, I always hear from people. I hear from like friends. I would hear from peers. I would hear from people who are you know, mentors of mine. I would always hear about sex. But then me actually experiencing sex for myself, and on our honeymoon, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much more personal. This is so much more spiritual than I could have ever imagined. I mean, it's a vulnerable thing, yet it's something that's also very beautiful. It's something that's also like, I don't know, like there's just
a little risky and like it feels like, but safe.
Yeah,
like you're exploring, but you're also really safe in your exploration. And that's it's a beautiful paradox in so many ways. Sex is.
And so for me to be like, okay, what I just did, like that, like literally, I'm going to say for sure it's spiritual. If I was to do that with other people before I was married, gosh, like that would have messed me up for sure. And I think that's why the Bible is very clear on that, just because of the beauty of it and protecting it and letting that be something that you get to spend with that person or you get to do with that person.
That's where I really do appreciate your image of a balloon, and that it's not like you have sex outside of marriage and the balloon pops, but it's that it's deflated. And so there's hope there because it does happen. But I think recognizing, like, I was not a virgin when Addison and I got married, and I will say sex within marriage is nothing like sex outside of marriage. I mean, if anything, it was this journey that we had to move through, and a lot of pain even on both sides, and recognizing like, oh man, this didn't have to exist. And even though it did, we navigated it, we found our way through it, and you know, had a clearer, deeper understanding of one another. Yeah. But it was a setback. Now, there was this, we were together in that. We were together in navigating the setback. But even now, conversations with our 12 and 13-year-old, I'm very open with them, telling them like the decisions I made, the reasoning behind the decisions I made, and really just not valuing it. Like you were saying, there was this beautiful idea that you were the protector and it was going to be presented to your husband. That is not how I viewed it at all. But having been able to do that, to give that to Addison would have been such a gift. And so it's been a wonderful tool in conversations with our kids where, of course, they're like, oh, dad is this angelic being and mom is so lucky.
Wow.
Not really, but somewhat, which is fine. Like, I just know that that's the fullness of the way that God is raising them to recognize, like, okay, there is a cost here.
Yeah.
And so there is a cost, but it's not that cost hasn't been paid. Like, ultimately, it was paid by Jesus on the cross.
Yeah, that's good.
And he moves us through the rehabilitation, he has an infinite supply of helium or water.
Right. Or
whatever your balloon
whatever you're
is.
filling. Yeah.
And we experienced that too.
Yeah, we have. Right. And I mean, as you said, it's something that we move through, and God's grace is there for us if we'll move through whatever it is. But going back to this idea of God's design for marriage, and Hebrews 13, we read this idea of honoring the marriage bed and God's design for marriage, and that's coming off the heels of this amazing litany of heroes of the faith, people who did the difficult things, who said yes when they couldn't see an end result, who were groomed by the Spirit of God to ultimately reveal the person of Jesus, and were invited into that perfection that is described in Hebrews 12. Anyway, it's just a beautiful story. We have to realize that when we go to, like you mentioned, what Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 6 and 7, Paul makes a statement that sexual sin is different than any other sin. Yeah. Because it's a sin against the body. And he also makes the statement that, because what they were doing in Corinth is they were going and they were sleeping with prostitutes. And these were Christ followers. And they were writing it off as, well, no, this isn't really an issue because it's just our bodies that are having sex. Our spirits are clean and clear, but it's just our bodies that are connecting with the prostitute. And this is that Gnostic belief that what matters is the spirit and the body isn't really that important, but God dignified flesh by taking on flesh. And we read about our resurrected bodies in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul talks about how we will have a body, and the body will be different, but we will have a form of flesh that is resurrected. And anyway, the properties are different, but it's still very much a part of who we are. And he's saying, hey, when you connect yourself with a prostitute, when you're doing this, then you're joining, you're having that spiritual experience with that person. You are joining yourself with that person. Yeah. And so the myth that we can go out there and we can practice, like it is just,
and that it doesn't count for
there's
anything.
No cost there. And I will say this though, before we segue into the next one, I do think it's important for us to recognize that we around the table need to create space for us to have conversations about sex and how God designed us as sexual beings. So they're not just learning, and we're not just having conversation about like what people are doing wrong. Because I feel like oftentimes when we talk about sex, it's like what these people are doing wrong, what those people over there, how they're getting it wrong. And so the idea of sex is defined by what it looks like when it's wrong. And the idea of sexuality is what it looks like when it's wrong, not us casting vision and talking about why God designed it to work in this particular way and what that does for us, what that does in us, and how that unfolds through the different seasons of our lives. So that's marriage myth number 1. Marriage myth, sex edition number 1. Anything else on that before we go to number 2?
No, I honestly think that you just wrapped that up really good. And that was really interesting about the people and how they were separating flesh from spirit and everything. That's fascinating.
God made us to have biochemical and anatomical responses and connections, like you were talking about with those hormones. Like he designed us perfectly for us to experience this incredible connection, and we can't be flippant about
soul,
that.
and body.
Wow, it's
beautiful. It's crazy.
And we should have these conversations, and not just like, oh, you can't do this, or you should do this, or blah blah blah. It's like, no, actually, let's talk about the way God designed us to work sexually, because it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like this isn't something we should just quickly pass by with one sex talk when blah, blah. Like this is something that should be an ongoing conversation because it's a big part of what it is to be human.
Yeah. Well, and I recently was in a conversation with Asher and Sophia, and we were talking about the sensitivity of your hands and your lips. And I can't even remember why or how we got there or how we had a conversation for an hour without being interrupted. But it went down the realm of what an orgasm is. And then we started talking about masturbation. And it was such an organic and honest conversation. I was like, I can't imagine having this information at that age. So that way, when we say, hey, are you sure you want to hold hands? Are you sure you want to kiss? Because that is priming you for sex. You're designed this way. God designed you this way. So we're not being these legalistic parents saying, don't hold hands because holding hands is wrong. It's no, that urge, that desire, it does not stop at holding hands. And if you feed that, then the next, then the next. And so recognizing there has to be a space for these conversations because there is a design here, and being open to the design and recognizing the way we're made, the way our brains work, the different stimulation and curiosity. All of this has a place in conversation.
And it's good.
And it's good.
The
like
curiosity
you
is
said.
good.
Yes. If all we're saying is it's wrong, it's bad, this is what's wrong, this is what's bad, it leaves so much room for the enemy to get to create the conversation.
Set the tone.
Set the tone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And shame.
Ugh.
That's good.
Like shame is lurking anywhere there's anything having to do with sex.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
Oh,
Okay. Next one. Anything goes in marriage. Myth number 2. Anything goes in marriage. So things like
This could get a little.
Yeah, this
I mean, if you haven't turned away now,
yeah.
and if you don't even,
If you're still in,
now's the time. But this could get good.
like so masturbation, sex toys, multiple partners, like inviting other people in if both people are comfortable with it. What's wrong? Swinging, inviting other people into the mix, watching pornography together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Go.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. You just said a lot there, babe. I think no. Yeah. I think so. So Maddie and I, of course, we wanted to go through marriage counseling.
Yeah.
And some of these were discussed. Babe, is there anything that actually you even want to talk about? Because I know that one thing stuck out to us with actually our marriage counselors about one of these things within specifically sex toys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many different opinions. And just to reiterate that again, like, this is not necessarily the truth, but honestly, it was really refreshing and really good advice. And I'm so glad our marriage counselors went there with us. But they were talking to us, we had read in a book about how it was good to use sex toys in marriage because of X, Y, and Z. And it was good to masturbate. I think you even read it was good to masturbate before the wedding day, like the morning of the wedding day.
Yeah.
And so we came in.
So lots of opinions. For sure. I mean, going back to what you were saying.
Opinions.
There's opinions and then there's, exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But our marriage counselors, they sat us down and they started sharing with us how, because we were both virgins, we didn't know the extent of sex yet or anything like that. And so we'd been reading a lot. We had a lot of head knowledge, but hadn't actually experienced it. And they sat us down and they were talking to us about how when you bring other things into your marriage, whether that be a sex toy or whether that be practices or watching pornography or all these things, you actually create a dependency upon that. And that was super refreshing for us to hear because we kind of from the get-go were like, I want to be dependent upon you. I don't want to be dependent upon something else to satisfy me. Like I don't want something else to replace what God designed you to do for me. And even though it may take more time to learn each other, and even though it may take more time to get it right, so to speak, I don't know if you can really do it right or wrong, but before you're at the place of 15 years, and it's a totally different experience to the first year.
Yeah.
But they were sharing they were sharing with us just the beauty of learning each other and putting in the work. And even though it may not be instantaneous, it's worth it because we then had that dependency upon each other and not some other thing fulfilling us.
Oh, and even just not that, like, I mean this in the most innocent way, but even like the satisfaction of that too, of just like knowing like, oh man, like we know each other, like, and like, hey, like there's nobody on this planet that's going to know Alec Bevere like Maddie because she knows me perfectly, and there's nothing that has to get me to certain levels or certain places. A toy doesn't have to do that. Like Maddie Bevere is the person that knows me well, and that's another form of like intimacy.
Yeah.
And
I'm not trying to harp on a word that you used.
Sure.
Where you
Intimacy?
said no, know me perfectly.
No, okay,
You said, know me perfectly.
Yeah.
And I think if we reframe, and we talk about this a lot, like it's about doing it well, not about it doing perfect.
Yeah.
And family needs to be a safe place. Marriage needs to be a safe place to do it well. At the end of our lives, we are good done, or well done, good and faithful servant, not perfectly done. Okay, so there's something there that we have to navigate within our sexual experience with each other. But I was loving what you were sharing, Maddie, about like, there shouldn't be this pressure to get it right instantaneously. And here's the thing, it's still perfect because it's not this end result that we're going after. It's like even the way James uses the word perfect, teleos, in James 1, it's perfection that only comes through a process. It's not knowing the right answer. It's actually being on the right journey. That's actually what perfection is about.
Asking the right questions.
Asking the right questions. And if we're in this intimate marriage and sex is a place of exploration, of knowing and being known, and we're going outside of what the two of us have and this dynamic of two becoming one, then we're actually distracted from discovery. We're actually not discovering what this person is because we're defaulting to distractions, which is the pattern of our age.
Yeah.
We default to distractions. And so of course that would come into our marriage. And so we think, oh, I've got to look at porn and discover what's over there in order to make this more beautiful and wonderful, instead of just really looking at this, seeing this, spending time with this, being okay with this being messy, being okay with not having all the answers, being okay with not being the best at sex when we begin, because I'm not the best at knowing my wife when we began. Like it took time, it took energy, it took commitment to really know Juli and know what works. And here's the thing, y'all, as someone 15 years into it, you don't figure out the answer and then it's the same the rest of your life. It changes because Juli's not a static person. I'm not a static person. We're dynamic. The seasons of life hit us differently, right? Like there have been seasons where Juli's carried me more. There have been seasons where I've carried her more. And that's a part of what we're navigating together intimately as we work out what it is to be married and everything that comes with that.
Wow.
But the key is to just keep showing up. And like what you were hitting at earlier, like the key is to keep going there in that place, even if it's difficult in some seasons. In some seasons, it is more difficult to be on that like discovery, like to be there and to be committed to that. Like it is more difficult. But as we do that, it's like, man, the way it pays off and what it does in us as we move through that, there's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
And the temptation is to create an affinity for, a toy or an experience that is an extra marital experience, stuff like that. And that's distracting us from what we really desire.
Or even to make sex a formula. Like if I do A and B, then I will get C, rather than this is a journey and who knows, like this is fun. Let's figure out this together and let's open up communication. Like let's actually talk about the awkward and let's talk about the great so that we can move forward and not be stuck in the same position. Because I think even like as newlyweds, we were like, we're just going to know how to do this straight away. And we're virgins. So it's going to be perfect, which is kind of just, I don't know. It's so ironic that we would even think that. Because that's like an oxymoron. But yes, I love hearing that it is a journey, and even like our awkward. And I mean, we're still learning each other, and that's okay. And that's beautiful. And it's fun.
It is. And you are going to go through so many seasons. Like you are in this for the long haul, and ultimately sex is not just about like the physical satisfaction. And I think that's where the world has placed it, like it's eating a good meal, as opposed to the deeper level of intimacy and knowing and being known. And that is what comes to my mind and where my conviction lies with masturbation, sex toys, pornography. It's that level of artificial stimulation. You always have to keep upping it and finding what else is going to satisfy that need that you created, a hunger that you created.
Yeah.
And so, or that was created in your childhood, or gosh, there's so many different realms where that could go. And again, I just want to continue to reiterate the reality that all of these things, these fractures can be brought into the light.
Yes.
And clarity can be found.
Yeah.
There's not this like, oh, I didn't follow it correctly, so I just have to kind of continue down whatever's working for us. Like, no, that's again the journey is coming together and saying, I know this is where we've been. I know this is what we've been doing. It's not right. It's not the fullness of what God has for us in the area of our sexual relationship. And so that knowing, like, to create that hunger that you have to continue to satisfy and really inevitably leads to very dark places.
Yeah.
Like that is the world, the way the world has brought in the counterfeit version of stimulation, sex, satisfaction. It just goes to these places of darkness where there's this like, they're monsters. How could they get there? It starts in the very innocent seeming places of just, I'm just following this curiosity. That kind of went down a weird road, but.
No, it's so good.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, with this, I do think we can say one thing that we do know that is wrong, and that is pornography. Yeah.
So talk about facts versus or true opinion.
Yeah.
There's no place. There's no place for pornography.
I just want to make sure that it's clear that we know that that's not an opinion.
No place for pornography. There's no place for bringing other people into your sexual experience with your spouse, whether that's someone on a TV
with the exception of like counselors.
Correct. Sorry.
Yes.
I meant yes. That's healthy and that's helpful, and we would definitely recommend that people do that. But then as far as sex toys, what we've shared is a strong opinion that there's a danger of creating a fascination with a particular toy and looking to that toy for something that you only find through discovering your spouse and serving your spouse. Because the danger when it comes to sexual experiences is to make it all about you, which is not the way, like God designed sex to be very gratifying, personally gratifying. But the best sex is when you are going into that experience to figure out, how am I positioned to serve this person in this point of connection.
That's good.
And so anything that leads us away from that when it comes to the sexual experience, I have concerns with personally. And I'm just talking about from my own personal experience and from the conversations that I've had with friends who are navigating, whether it's addiction to masturbation within their marriage, and that's causing issues with intimacy with their spouse, or if it's people who are on the other side of a divorce because they were no longer able to connect with their spouse intimately because they either went out and found someone else, or they just lost all connection because they were finding connection at a different point or from a different person.
Yeah, that's a very real message a spouse could hear if you introduce things like masturbation, toys, that they're not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And pornography. I know women whose husbands have an addiction to pornography. That is this like blaring evidence. Oh, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
Like the act of having to look at someone else in order to excite them, to get them to that place. I mean, devastating for what is, like you said at the very beginning, this mystical union, mind, body, soul, spirit. To bring that stuff in really is a taint to the purity and goodness and beauty that is sex within marriage.
And I love what you shared earlier about this might not be where you're at right now. Like your road to this point may look very different than what we've described. We're going through Atomic Habits right now as a family with our two older kids. Yeah. Wow. Big shout out to James Clear.
Yeah.
And he talks about like these small changes, right?
Yeah.
Small changes over an extended period of time. And he talks about how habits are formed based on identity. Like the most powerful habits are formed on the identity level. And that's where we want to encourage y'all. Like, let's start by believing that we are who God says we are.
It's well said.
And let's start there when it comes to his design for sexuality. We don't have to understand how all of this works. And I find like when it comes to things of God, when I start obeying, when I take action, I find the strength to obey in ways that previously I didn't realize I could obey. And that's actually what James Clear is getting at with Atomic Habits. He's like, you might not feel like you're someone who can quit smoking, but start saying, I don't smoke, or I'm not a smoker. That's what he said. I'm not a smoker. Like just start saying that, and then you start living like that. And so I would just encourage y'all, wherever you're at, like, please listen to the things that we share. Go back, play through these again. Some of these, as we've shared, are truths. Others are opinions. Yeah. As couples, y'all can wade through that. We mentioned Hebrews 13, 1 Corinthians 6, 7. If y'all want to go in and read about that. Jesus talks about marriage in Matthew 19 too. That's another great place to read. And we're going to talk more about this in episodes ahead. Absolutely. Yeah.
And let us know if you're like, I entirely disagree. There are scenarios that you guys just don't even have context for. Absolutely. People are right.
Right.
There's one in particular, and I can't remember the details clearly enough, but I remember thinking like, it's never okay. And there was very much like, it was an act of serving one another.
Yeah.
And to a degree that I couldn't understand. And that is where there's a humility I hope that people are hearing.
Yeah.
But if you feel a ping point over this conversation, or if you're like really ticked right now, think about why. Yeah. Like we said, what's important here is that conversations are happening, that you are asking questions, that you are evaluating. Why do I do what I do? Why do I believe what I believe? And do I honestly still believe those things? Or am I just caught in the wave of culture that is telling me this is okay when I've kind of known it's not okay?
Yeah. Oh, that's huge. That's huge. Of like, you've actually been taking on the opinions of other people for a while. And if anything has made you upset, I totally agree with that. And Addison, what you're saying, I just want to back what you're saying about what James Clear is saying. I've had a few people who I've been mentoring, and over the years, whenever they've struggled with certain things, I told them actually an area in my life that I really found victory was realizing certain things that I am within God, and finding out, hey, you know what? There's certain things that I'm not called to do, and there's certain things that I'm not going to do. And then whenever I reach that moment of temptation, it's like, no, Alec Bevere doesn't do this. And literally talking to like some friends, and talking to them whenever they're trying to get out of these things. Because of course, guys, there's certain people that, just as Juli was talking about, you might be feeling a pain point because you feel like there's no hope. Yeah. Just know, like, there's certain things that you can, like Addison said, take that identity on and be like, hey, like, no, I don't do this. Like, whatever your name is.
I don't do this, but this is not who I am.
That's right.
It's just not who I am. Who you are. Because this is who I am, and this is what I do.
We could spend a whole podcast on that. And there's so much freedom within that whenever you realize who you actually are. And I know that sounds cliche, but it really is powerful once you fully understand it.
Yeah. Good. And how connected what we do is to who we are. Like, they really can't be parsed. And that's why James Clear's point is like, if you want to change who you are, change what you do. Like, he actually goes at it from that angle. So that's what James is getting at in the book of James, where he's talking about faith and works, not James Clear. I'm talking about James. I'm talking about James' brother Jesus here. So anyway, we do need to wrap this, but thank y'all for being on the show today and for opening up and sharing a bit of your story. Maddie, would you mind actually praying us out?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would be honored. Father, I just want to thank you for every word that was spoken. Father, I want to thank you for every person that has listened, Father, to this episode. And I just ask that you would do only what you can do in our lives, that you would bring us revelations, that you would bring us peace, that you would bring us comfort, that you would bring us hope, that you would bring us transformation so that we can walk into the entirety of who you have called us to be as individuals, singles, and as married people. And so, Father, we thank thank you, Lord God, for what you are going to do in our lives and what you are already doing in our lives. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
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 Amen. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us again at Home with the Beveres, where we are so passionate about helping you create a legacy starting at home. If you haven't already, go right ahead and like and subscribe. And guys, as well, leave us a comment below, because whenever you leave a comment, it helps us curate content that can help so many other people. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time at Home with the Beveres.